Hey guys, Sleepy Reader here. I've been wanting for a few days to share my thoughts on comic books I've read this past week from last Wednesday. And I will be covering sex criminals, so later in the video there will be some naughtier discussions, I guess, for those who might need a warning on that. I read a lot of stuff. One thing I read with my daughter, which was did turn out to be a lot of fun, was Reggie Stillskin with Betty and Veronica. They managed to kind of, the writer Dan Parent managed to kind of twist the Rumpelstiltskin fairy tale in a way that made it a more complete story and kind of fit in with some of the Archie stereotypes and involve two lovely young ladies instead of just one. Traditionally just the miller's daughter who has to weave straw into gold or spin straw into gold, and they twisted things around a lot in a lot of different ways, and it was fun for my daughter who's 5. Because she knows the story of Rumpelstiltskin pretty well, so it was kind of a meta experience for her where she could spot all the differences. And these sort of Archie versions of fairy tales seem a great way to get her into Archie, actually, because she's not really ready for worrying about high school. Not that Archie's aimed at real high schoolers, but it's supposed to be about high school life. But when it's about a fairy tale, it's really funny to her. And I enjoyed reading. You got to spend a lot of time reading with your children, and for me, if I can read a comic book, that's just a great way to go. Another kids comic that I picked up was Beware the Batman. And this definitely read too old for my daughter. I didn't even try reading it with her. I really dig the art style. The coloring's a little too dark, so it covers up the art style a little bit. But it's pretty cool art style. Batman doesn't have a lot of personality in here. The personality is left for his sidekicks, Alfred and Katana. And I guess they've put Katana in here for more diversity and to help young female viewers enjoy it. And she seems like this rejiggered version of her for the animated show. I've never seen the animated show, I've just read this comic book, but she seems like a fun character. The weird thing is, the bad guy, Anarchy, was using the, I can never remember the name of the movement. They give it a different name in here, but the movement in New York and elsewhere, where people camp out and they want to change the political situation with economics and all of that. Oh, what do you call it? And they're all wearing the Guy Fawkes masks and things. Anyway, they have that in here as a major plot element, and I would think that would not interest kids at all. And it felt odd to me in a Batman book. They did throw in a thing where, although the people in this movement hate all the billionaires, the one billionaire they realize is a good billionaire is Bruce Wayne. And that's sort of pandering straight at kids who want their hero to be a hero, even when he's a billionaire, in his billionaire guise. So anyway, I enjoyed it. Fun art. I think it's the kind of thing I might pick up, anytime I have a week where there's not that much to read, just to get some light, fun reading in. Another thing I picked up, maybe this was from the week before, but I finally read it this week, was Forever Evil Rogues Rebellion. And this was just an okay comic. There was nothing special about it. So I probably won't pick it up again unless, like with the Batman, Beware the Bat, if it's kind of a slow week or something. There was nothing wrong with it, but there was nothing real stand out about it. And let's see, The Flash kind of wrapped up a long story arc here. And for the most part, I was really satisfied. As always, loved the art, which I think this was the last issue with Francis Manapul art. But if you want to get real analytical about it, and given that they spent so long building up the story, the Flash sort of solves the problem in some kind of abstract way. There's just a lot of caption dialogues giving his narration where he says, you know, I absorb the energy back, etc., etc., and that solves the problem. There's no clever climactic confrontation and clever solution to defeating the reverse Flash. It's just that the Flash can reverse the energy, I guess. On the other hand, it was very satisfying how, given the long length of this arc, he defeats the reverse Flash in the first 10 pages, or less, first 9 pages, and then we get a very well done sort of coda where he wraps up all kinds of issues and makes things up with his girlfriend and sets all things to right and is kind of decided more about what his purpose in life is and what it means to be the Flash and everything. Wraps things up with this evil scientist Elias, and I really like that. And I hope that they actually stick with his girlfriend Patty, even though, you know, we know from the past that Iris is supposed to eventually become his girlfriend, right? But what I like about Patty is she's nice and nerdy, and I like having a smart, nerdy girlfriend. Anyhow, so that was decent. It could have been greater. I think I talked about, you know, at one point in one of my vlogs, I was talking about artists who are writers, and this lack of a great conclusion to the big finale with the Reverse Flash made me think of how, well, some writers, some people whose only job it is to be writers, take the easy way out. But I think it's more often that somebody who's a less experienced writer, or who thinks writing is easier than it really is, will take kind of an easy way out and not work the extra drafts or the extra thought to figure out some really clever way to end their story. But despite that, I was pretty happy with it. So let's see. And one that is a little harder for me to review because I read 6 issues of Daredevil in a row. I was catching up after my hiatus from buying new comics, and then some more Daredevils were building up. And reading all 6 of these in a row, I'm just blown away at how good the Wade and Samney run, and other artists on here, like Rodriguez does a perfectly good job, too. What a great job they do. I think the first 3 issues I read kind of wrapped up the long-standing, or maybe it was the first 2. I'm sorry, a little disorganized here. They wrap up some. I've got these issues all out of order. I think I read about. Anyway, they wrap up the long plot that eventually pointed its way towards Bullseye, and then they started a new plot with the. They had kind of a one and done with the Silver Surfer, which was just done beautifully, and then they've started this series about the Sons of the Serpent, this crypto racist group who's infiltrating the judicial system of New York City, and it's all just done really well. And the possible exception to all that is the most recent issue, where they veer off into Halloween land, but it's still a lot of fun. But it isn't as strong and logical as the earlier issues. But I think if you've been reading it all along, and I sort of aim this, I know some people kind of tried to pick it up with this issue, and maybe were less than impressed. If you've been reading it all along, you build up a pretty strong trust that they're going to go into interesting places. And it's certainly just a lot of fun to see Chris Samney draw all these traditional old school Marvel monster heroes like the Mummy and Satana, the daughter of Satan, and other, their version of Frankenstein and everything. Fun to see Doctor Strange in here and all of that. So it was a fun issue, not a great starting point for people who want to be wowed by Daredevil, I suppose. But I still think it was good. I am noticing that Wade has this clever shtick about things that Daredevil can't do because he's blind, despite all his extra powers. And he may be starting to overuse that, which is okay because soon his run, I believe, will be done on Daredevil in 4 more issues. So, where he doesn't realize that these monsters are monsters because he can't see them, but I would think they smell different or something, so that in that case it was perhaps overplayed. There's been some other clever parts where, like, he thought someone was a member of the Sons of the Serpent, even though that person was multiracial, because he couldn't see that person was multiracial. So yeah, still loving Daredevil. Okay, still in the superheroes is the Adventures of Superman. This issue was good. I don't think I loved it as much as I have some of the other issues. This often collects 10-page and 20-page stories from the digital comic, but this was a 3 digital comic arc. It was 30 pages of all one story. Had great art by Marcus Toe. It's kind of it turned out to be a story taking place, right at the beginning of Superman's career when the world doesn't know about him yet. But I didn't pick up on that, so it took me like halfway through the story, or even more than halfway through the story, to realize this is like the early days for Superman. And so maybe I would have appreciated the story more. We bring in Mongol, and that was fun, and the sort of evil General Lane, and we get Zod. Zod just kind of appears to Superman from nowhere, just hovering out of the Phantom Zone and talking to him in his Fortress of Solitude. I think the fact that he already had the Fortress of Solitude confused me a bit. It made me think he'd been around for a while. But I don't know how Zod can just sort of appear out of the air in the Fortress of Solitude just to talk to Superman. He doesn't escape from the Phantom Zone or anything in this issue. So it's worth getting. This is still my favorite Superman book. It was maybe, not up there with the best issues. So now I'm going to talk about 2 indie books from Image, creator-owned books, I guess is the best way to call them, that happen to be by a husband and wife. Matt Fraction doing Sex Criminals, as the husband and wife were the writers, and on Pretty Deadly we have Kelly Sue DeConnick, which to talk about first. I'll talk about Pretty Deadly first. I was listening to Kelly Sue DeConnick on a podcast, Word Balloon, I believe, and she's a great talker and interesting to listen to, and has these moments of self-deprecation. And in one of them, she said, I don't know if I know I'm really good at promoting books. I'm not 100% sure that I'm as good at writing them. And I, after reading this, thought back to her saying that, and I've read good stuff by her and less exciting stuff by her, and I haven't read a lot by her, just a little here and there, a little bit of Captain Marvel, a little bit of Ghost, and then a short story and a horror anthology that was pretty good, but to me, the writing in this book was a big letdown. The art is fantastic, starting with this wraparound cover. the coloring and the colorist, Jordi Belar, and the artist work together so well. It's almost like, the perfect indie comic art, in a way. Or, kind of like the kind of art you'd expect in a really great Vertigo comic. It would be excellent art for Sandman, for instance. And I think that what Kelly Sue DeConnick is going for here is kind of a Western crossed with Sandman. Kind of the fable and fairy tale feel of things mixed with the weird Western genre. I mean, we're certainly getting a lot of that, with the Great Six Gun, the possibly Great East of West. I dropped reading that, but I might pick it up in trades. And, Jonah Hex has been there all along. I don't know if in recent years he has much supernatural in his stories. But, but if you think about, although Kelly Sue DeConnick is obviously very outgoing, there's a strong streak of insecurity. And when I read this twice, trying to see if I had misjudged it or misunderstood it. And I don't read that many comics twice in a row like that. I'll come back to them years later. But and to me, it's the kind of narrative that speaks of the writer's insecurity. Because, for instance, we got two framing devices, two sort of stories that are supposed to frame the main story. The first is about a rabbit and a butterfly. And I don't know what was going on there, but then I saw in an interview with Kelly Sue DeConnick in USA Today, of all places, that that the butterfly stood for one of the characters and the bunny stood for one of the characters. And then after we get those 2 pages of the rabbit and the butterfly as a framing device, then we get a framing device of these kind of minstrels, you might say, who come through an old west town, stand up on the gallows, and tell a fairy tale that is a sort of origin for this daughter of death, this female killer character. And visually it's very clever, and they've even got their own kind of comic book page that they display while they're telling the story. But the story is told in sing-song rhymes that came off as really lame to me. Attend the song of death-faced Ginny and how she came to be. A wraith of rage for men who'd cage and harm what should be free. It's what I think of as a lot of on-the-nose rhyming and not very... the rhymes control the poetry, so to speak. But it's not very poetic, other than the fact that they've, squished in some rhymes. And it doesn't seem like that. To me, it wasn't a compelling way to tell the story. I keep just looking at the art. And then so after we have those kind of framing devices, the people telling the story become part of the story, I guess. And there's a lot that the author wants us to pick up on that I didn't pick up on. Like there's this blind guy who's one of the minstrels. Someone is shooting at him, and they miss, and then he shoots back and hits one of them. But then, as time goes on, apparently, those people who were shooting at him are part of his own group. So I don't know, why were they shooting at him? And he knew who they were, and he shot one of them and gave him a pretty bad wound in his shoulder. And then there's some document that they've stolen out of someone's pocket, which they then burn, but in the process of burning, they see what it is, and they know they need to run from someone who's hunting them. It can be good in a beginning of a story to have some mysteries to try to unfold, but this is all mystery and no characters to latch onto. There's an interesting scene at a brothel. There's a woman kind of bounty hunter or hunter, or maybe she's Ginny, the daughter of death. Do they name her here? But they name her Alice. So is she separate from this person we see at the end? Or is that also her with kind of death painted on her face? So I think we got too many characters, too many ideas with no explanation. Few of the characters have any character beats that we can latch onto. I'm sounding like some kind of story analyst here for a writer's group, so I apologize for that. But I know that some people really love it and some people have really disliked this issue. So since I read it twice, I was trying to analyze why it didn't work for me. I loved the art. There's a possibility that all of these elements will grow much stronger in the next issue or two. So I think I'll definitely pick up the next issue because it's such a nice package. Or it might be something that will read a lot better in trade than here. Yeah, so I'm kind of waiting and seeing, but I don't hold up great hope. It also reminds me, some people have huge confidence in writers in comic books. I have a lot of confidence in the artists. If you see someone's a good artist, you're almost always going to have a good time art-wise if you pick up a book by them. But even quite good writers have their down moments where things don't work. There's a lot of, especially if you're trying to do new things, if you're not just following tried and true formulas, there's a lot of chances to fall over. So I'm always, when I'm reading books, thinking, is the writer gonna pull this off, or should I drop this book and read something else? So this is really on the cusp. If the art weren't so great, I probably would have just dropped it, with this issue. So yeah, much better was the book by her husband. But, and again, we carried on the shoulders of really excellent art and color. But this second issue of Sex Criminals is more about the male hero and his sort of sexual past. And I felt a lot less sympathy for him. It's all about masturbation, and it turns out to be all about porn. But I guess, in the first issue with the woman, there was a hook into her sexual development that gave me a lot of sympathy and interest for her. And even though all of us males are way more visual and stuff, there seemed to be no emotional content for him, and I care less about him than her. I'm going to keep reading. I'm interested to see what's happening. There's, all of this is framed by they're still in the middle of robbing a bank. I think they're robbing a bank, and and someone else knows that they're doing it and is coming to get them. They've frozen time by having sex, and someone else knows that they're coming to get them. I think, maybe some men's adolescence is only about porn and masturbating. And yes, the hormones drive us so that it's very hard to think about anything else but sex. But I think that many of us still have lots of emotional connections to the real world, not just porn, when we're teenagers. Crushes on real world girls, hopes, dreams, all of that. And that's not in there with him the way it was with her. And I don't know if that means that Matt Fraction, it's just chance maybe, and he's chosen to make the male character one extreme and the female character another maybe. But it just makes me not care about the male character very much. And it makes me wonder why she should want to be with him. So yeah, but maybe more will develop about him as time goes on. And he has, even though his narrative skips through time, it has a very strong through line. You can always follow and tell what's going on, and you have a strong sense of the characters and everything. But because I was kind of thinking about his wife being insecure, I was kind of looking for, it was kind of the theme for me when reading these two books. It became, kind of what's the insecurities of these writers. And it's almost like, even though part of him wants to write kind of a sensitive examination of realistic sex, another part of him wants to be cool. And, it's kind of fun the way they write, duh, don't sell this to minors. But there's that kind of snap, that kind of, ooh, yeah, we're talking about sex here, you better be down with it. That's kind of a veil for insecurity of a sort. And here we get, which is for me way too much TMI, a picture of Matt Fraction getting his nipple pierced. And I could care less whether he has pierced nipples or not, and I don't know why he wants me to know that he got his nipples pierced. And in the letters page, they do things like joke drawings about where the clitoris is, and other kind of jokey letters about sex. So here we are, we're being all open about sex, but then we have to start snickering about it and go back to being teenagery about it, or college frat about it, because we're not secure about it after all. So that makes it kind of an interesting mix, but it also makes it feel like the author is not as grown up as he would like to be, or is not as secure in himself about talking about sex as he would like to be. And I guess I noticed in the first book, where it said, this book is dedicated to people who like to fuck. When really it's more dedicated, or, so far, it's the core of the story is dedicated to people who struggle with their sexuality and try to find a place for their own sexuality in the world, maybe. Which is different than just dedicated to people who like to fuck. You could say that about a porn movie or something. So there is an interesting dichotomy here, which perhaps reflects the author's own insecurities. Perhaps not. I may be stretching there. So thanks for hanging in there with me. I've gone way too long, and I'm gonna... Oh, I also read issue 1 of the first run of Shaolin Cowboy, although I think part of the joke, they say that it's actually volume 54 of Shaolin Cowboy. And this one is amazing because it has basically a 10-page splash page, but it just continues from page to page. So this is as much a put-on, a jokey kind of thing as the current first issue of Shaolin Cowboy is. So I've stopped worrying at all if there's any kind of plot on here. I have ordered the remaining issues. And maybe I'll talk more about Shaolin Cowboy in the future. It's not... The paper it's printed on doesn't take the color as well as the newer Dark Horse edition. So that's a good thing about the new version. The art is totally mind-blowing. And totally gross out. So anyway, I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.